Hey guys, tonight we're diving into a world softer than a fainting couch, but somehow much, much harder. The daily reality of Victorian women. That's right, while your spine decompresses in a 21st century mattress, we're about to slip sideways into a world of corsets tighter than your inbox, social rules more complex than your last group chat, and expectations so high they make your in-laws seem downright reasonable. If you've ever felt overwhelmed by housework, judged by strangers, or attacked by the subtle violence of your husband wanting you to smile more, congratulations, you'd fit right in. Before we get stuck in a dress with more buttons than the space shuttle, go ahead and like the video and subscribe, but only if you actually enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment telling me what time it is and where you are listening from. Now, dim those lights, switch on your fan for that Victorian haunted house ambience, and let's get you comfortable. Let's pause for a moment. Have you ever wondered what Victorian women actually did all day? Did they ever eat anything other than bland pudding? How long did it take to get dressed? And did anyone ever admit they couldn't breathe? How did they find time to read when there were 17 calling cards to answer before breakfast? What was their workout routine, carrying a fainting chair up the stairs, or fighting off over-enthusiastic suitors? Were they really obsessed with embroidery, or was that just a socially acceptable way to avoid talking to their relatives? Congratulations, you've just woken up in the year 1875. You're in a ruffled nightgown. You can hear the clatter of a coal delivery outside. And there's a good chance you'll be judged for blinking too loudly before noon. Good luck. You wake up in a bed piled so high with blankets you briefly consider whether you're being slowly smothered by a well-meaning aunt. The fire in your bedroom has gone out hours ago, and the air is brisk enough to freeze your hopes and dreams. Welcome to a Victorian morning, where getting up is a feat, and your first decision is whether to ring for the maid or just hope she's already lurking with tea and judgment. Let's set the scene. You're cocooned in a 4-poster bed, draped with enough fabric to carpet a small ballroom, lying flat on a mattress stuffed with horsehair, down feathers, or if you're unlucky, something that used to be straw and now only smells like disappointment. Above you hangs a heavy velvet canopy that blocks out not only light but also any lingering ambitions you had about being a morning person. You are, in essence, sleeping in the most over-engineered pillow fort history has ever devised. There's no alarm clock. Instead, you are awakened by a chorus of Victorian house noises, the distant clatter of coal being dumped into a scuttle, the soft scraping of a maid cautiously entering your room, and the muted thump of your own regret for staying up until midnight, reading Jane Eyre under the covers. Maybe you're lucky and someone has relit the fire, or maybe you're already mentally preparing your gracious but firm complaint about frostbite in the salon later. You consider burrowing deeper, but you know what's coming. The day will not wait for you, and neither will your social obligations. The air is so cold your breath comes out in little puffs, and you briefly contemplate inventing central heating just to avoid leaving the bed. But this is the Victorian era, so your only option is to reach for the bell pull, a tasseled rope hanging conveniently at your bedside, which, when yanked, signals to the maid that it's time to begin the morning's elaborate theatre. The maid arrives, quietly judgmental in her perfectly ironed cap, bearing a tray of weak tea, a sliver of toast, and the vague hope that today you won't require the chamber pot immediately. She opens the heavy drapes, letting in the glorious British sunlight, grey, diffused, and slightly damp, like being gently slapped awake by a fog bank. You are now visible to the outside world, or at least to the neighbour's gardener, who is either trimming the hedge or, more likely, eavesdropping for gossip material. The next step in the morning battle is the bottle ritual. Not the fun kind. This is the Victorian hot water bottle, freshly filled from the kitchen kettle and wrapped in flannel. It's been keeping your toes at a toasty 32 degrees Fahrenheit all night, and now needs to be awkwardly handed off to the maid, who will replace it with one for tonight's bedtime. Try not to make eye contact. You both know how this goes. You swing your legs out of bed, immediately regretting it as your feet hit the freezing floor. No central heating means your toes have just made contact with what Victorian architects call characterful original floorboards and what you call frostbite roulette. If you're upper crust, there might be a faded rug underfoot. If not, you're experiencing the historical version of the ice bucket challenge. Getting dressed is still a distant nightmare. First, you must face the infamous morning wash. A jug of water, which was warm when the maid brought it, about half an hour ago, now sits stone cold on the washstand. You splash your face, gasping like a goldfish tossed onto a glacier, and dab yourself dry with a towel so stiff it could probably double as a baking tray. Hygiene, Victorian style, is basically a punishment for waking up. While you attempt to restore circulation to your extremities, your mind wanders to your daily duties. A schedule full of gentle exercise, endless letter writing, and worrying about whether your cousin's new hat is a threat to civilization. But for now, you've won the first skirmish. You are vertical. You are awake. You are 80% blanket and 20% existential dread. And if you manage to avoid tripping over the chamber pot, you're already ahead of the game. Welcome to the battle of the boudoir. Same struggle, different century. Before you can face society, you must first survive the daily ordeal of getting dressed. This isn't grab the nearest hoodie territory. No, you need help, usually from a long-suffering lady's maid, just to be wrestled into a corset so tight it could probably alter your DNA. Breathing is optional. Posture is mandatory. You begin the ordeal shivering in your chemise, the last remaining whisper of comfort before the armour of the day. Your maid approaches with the calm determination of a Victorian field surgeon, already sizing up your ribcage and calculating the odds of you fainting before breakfast. The corset itself is a fearsome garment, boned, laced, and designed to transform your midsection into an hourglass, even if you were born more in the shape of a reliable loaf of bread. The process is less slip it on and more negotiation with physics. You grab the bedpost for leverage, while your maid tugs at the laces with the kind of determination usually reserved for yanking tree stumps out of the ground. Each pull is accompanied by the delicate soundtrack of creaking fabric, desperate exhales, and, on a good day, just a hint of wheezing. This is the Victorian version of a HIIT workout. Hold. Inhale. Endure. If you're lucky, the corset fits as intended, meaning you can almost take a full breath and only lose feeling in one arm. If you're unlucky, you're auditioning for the lead role in a very slow, very polite suffocation. Victorians believed a tiny waist was the epitome of beauty and self-control, but in reality, it's a daily contest between vanity, gravity, and your body's basic will to live. But wait, there's more. The corset is just the beginning. Over it goes a soft cotton petticoat, then another petticoat, then possibly a flannel one, if the British weather is set to damp punishment. Each petticoat is another layer of insulation against both the chill and any hopes of spontaneous movement. By the time you're fully equipped, your lower half resembles a tiered wedding cake, and any attempt to sit quickly is a calculated risk. Next comes the crinoline, a bell-shaped cage of whalebone or steel, designed to give your skirt its fashionable width and ensure you take up more space in the drawing room than a Victorian ottoman. Walking through doorways becomes a strategic maneuver. If you misjudge the angle, you'll either wedge yourself in the frame or take half the coat rack with you. If you've ever tried to parallel park a minivan on a busy street, you have a sense of what it's like to navigate a breakfast parlour in a crinoline. Now, the outer dress. This could be cotton for daytime, silk if you're fancy, or worsted wool if you're planning to spend several hours regretting your life choices. The sleeves are tight, the buttons are infinite, and every layer is designed to send a clear message. You are not here for comfort. Your maid fastens the dozens of tiny buttons running from your throat to your shins, each one a monument to patience and the world's most impractical fashion engineering. Accessories are next. Stockings, held up with garters that, let's face it, never stay put. A pair of boots laced to mid-calf, a chemisette to fill in any scandalous gaps at the neck, and of course, gloves. You may be only one minor inconvenience away from passing out, but at least your wrists are modestly covered. Finally, your hair must be arranged, a process so elaborate it deserves its own tragic opera. Curls are pinned, bonnets are perched, and not a strand is allowed to escape, lest the neighbours start a petition. A discreet spritz of lavender water completes the ensemble, though after half an hour wrestling with the corset, what you really need is electrolytes and a support group. Fully dressed, you're ready to face the world, or at least the hallway, standing taller, breathing shallower, and with a new appreciation for modern athleisure wear. It's not just dressing, it's survival. Victorian style. Forget wolfing down a breakfast burrito in your car. In Victorian England, breakfast is a stately, silent parade of tea, toast, and the crushing weight of family expectations. The good news? Porridge is always available. The bad news? So is your mother's subtle disappointment. You enter the breakfast room after your marathon battle with corsets, petticoats, and self-respect. The table stretches so far you're not entirely sure where it ends, possibly in another postal district. Crisp white linens, silver cutlery, and enough porcelain to make a royal wedding blush await you, along with at least one relative whose face is already set to mildly dissatisfy. Taking your assigned seat, never, ever the head of the table unless you're the matriarch, and even then, only if everyone else is deceased. You brace yourself for the first ordeal, the pouring of the tea. This isn't just a beverage, it's a test. Pour too quickly, and you risk splashing on the tablecloth. Scandal. Pour too slowly, and Aunt Agnes will sigh so deeply she might dislodge a rib. A delicate spoon clinks against bone china as you stir in exactly one sugar cube, unless, of course, someone is watching, in which case it's half a cube and a performance of dietary restraint. Milk goes in after, unless you're a known anarchist, in which case you might put it in before, just to see who gasps. The menu is reliable, if not exactly thrilling. Toast, stacked like tiny shingles, sits in a silver rack engineered to ensure maximum dryness by the time it reaches your plate. Porridge, thick enough to patch holes in the wall, is ladled into bowls with all the enthusiasm of a minor funeral. If it's a special day, you might get a boiled egg or, in moments of wild extravagance, a single sausage. Everything must be eaten with the right utensil, at the right pace, and preferably without any visible enjoyment. Conversation is permitted, but only in a low, decorous murmur, and only on topics that won't startle the butler or give grandmother another reason to talk about the Crimean War. Safe subjects include the weather, the garden, and whether anyone has seen Lady Penelope's new spaniel. Never mention bodily functions, the stock market, or, heaven forbid, feelings. And then there's the lurking presence of family dynamics. Your father, hidden behind an impenetrable wall of the Times, occasionally lowers the paper to deliver a cryptic comment about the importance of punctuality. Translation, you were 2 minutes late. Your younger siblings silently plot the assassination of the porridge, while your mother surveys the table with an expression that suggests both pride and a quiet terror that you'll never marry. Meanwhile, your own anxiety percolates quietly along with the tea. Did you remember to keep your elbows off the table? Is your napkin in your lap, folded into an origami swan of unobtrusive respectability? Is your posture upright, but not so upright as to appear tense, which suggests nerves, which suggests a secret, which suggests you'll be the subject of post-breakfast gossip? There's a reason Victorians invented fainting couches. Most of them were just looking for a horizontal surface where they could panic in peace. Servants glide in and out, removing empty plates and replenishing the ever-dwindling toast supply. You try not to make eye contact. If you drop your fork, do not, under any circumstances, retrieve it yourself. This is a job for a footman, whose only joy in life may be judging how loudly you dropped it. The meal ends not with a raucous dash for the door, but with a gentle ripple of napkins being folded, chairs being pushed back in silence, and a final round of passive-aggressive remarks about someone's hair looking tired. You rise, not full but emotionally drained and ready for the next ordeal of the day. And so ends Victorian breakfast. Less a meal, more an endurance test in taste, tact, and the subtle art of surviving your relatives before 9 a.m. Congratulations, you passed, at least until tomorrow. You might think Victorian beauty routine means scented soaps and fragrant baths, but you'd be wrong. Hair is brushed for half an hour with military precision, and bathing is more rumour than reality. Dry shampoo? Try flour. Deodorant? Try luck. Let's begin with the crowning glory, your hair. It is both your pride and your cross to bear. Victorian hair is not just hair, it's a full-time job, a social barometer, and a potential cause for family scandal. Each morning, your maid arrives armed with a boar bristle brush, a selection of tortoiseshell combs, and the single-minded resolve of a general preparing for battle. The brushing process lasts so long you could probably read Wuthering Heights out loud and still have time left over for the pre-breakfast news. Why so much brushing? Because washing your hair, like catching a unicorn, is both rare and logistically daunting. A real Victorian hair washing is an epic event. Water must be lugged from the kitchen, boiled and hauled up the stairs by a red-faced servant who is now questioning their career choices. Then there's the soap, possibly homemade, possibly harsh enough to remove paint, and always suspiciously lumpy. Most women only brave a full wash once a week, at best. For everyone else, freshening up means a delicate dusting of hair powder, rice flour if you're fancy, regular flour if you're not, or, in moments of quiet desperation, a little talcum and a prayer. The result? Hair that's slightly less oily, but now smells faintly like yesterday's bread rolls. As for the rest of your body, the Victorian bath is more urban legend than daily routine. Full immersion bathing is reserved for special occasions or imminent royal visits. Most days, you make do with the strip wash, which involves a pitcher of lukewarm water, a sponge, and a strategic game of which parts are most likely to be inspected by a doctor, clergyman, or mother-in-law. Bathhouses exist, but are viewed with deep suspicion, and sometimes outright horror. Who knows what might happen in such places? Cleanliness, fraternizing, fun. Soap itself is a tricky affair. Fancy, scented soap is the domain of the rich, and even they use it sparingly, as if every lather shaves a year off the family fortune. For everyone else, soap is a dull, brown block of lye and animal fat that doubles as an emergency stain remover and triples as a doorstop. If you're lucky, you might have a lavender sachet tucked among your linens to add a faint suggestion of cleanliness. But mostly you smell like a blend of starch, wood smoke, and whatever anxiety you picked up at breakfast. Deodorant? That's more of a suggestion than a product. The best you can hope for is to mask any offending odours with a light sprinkle of eau de cologne, or by simply never raising your arms above waist height. Victorian etiquette conveniently insists on dainty hand movements and carefully folded fans, likely because nobody wants to unleash what's lurking under all those layers. If all else fails, there's always the tried and true solution. Blame the dog, blame the weather, blame the French. Teeth present a different battlefield. Toothpaste exists, but it comes as a powder, often flavoured with charcoal, salt or chalk, and leaves your mouth feeling like you licked a blackboard. Toothbrushes are made with bristles tough enough to strip barnacles off a ship, and dental visits are an adventure only for the truly brave. Floss? You're more likely to be flossing with a bit of string you found attached to your corset. Yet despite all this, the end result is a kind of weary elegance. You look presentable, at least from a safe social distance. Your hair is shiny, possibly from a month's worth of oil. Your face is powdered, for both beauty and the suppression of facts, and your perfume is just enough to keep most people from asking questions. In Victorian England, looking clean is far more important than being clean. And if you ever doubt it, just remember, somewhere, someone is brushing their hair for the full 30 minutes and pretending not to notice that you haven't had a bath since last Michaelmas. You, however, are ready to face the day, oily roots, flowery scalp, and all. The highlight of your morning is the inevitable round of calling cards, tiny, inscribed tickets that prove to your peers you are in fact still alive and only mildly socially awkward. You'll make and receive enough visits to fill an Excel spreadsheet, all in the pursuit of not being talked about in the wrong drawing room. Let's be clear, social calls are not optional. They're not for fun. They are, in fact, the backbone of the Victorian social pyramid, a never-ending cycle of visits, return visits, thank you visits, condolence visits, and, on truly festive occasions, the "I just moved in, please don't hate me" visit. At the heart of it all is the calling card, that dainty rectangle of heavy paper printed with your name in a font so curly it might be trying to spell something in Morse code. The ritual begins just after breakfast, when the family butler hands you a silver tray bristling with cards. Each one is a social IOU, a little reminder that Lady Farnsworth stopped by, and if you don't return the favour within 3 days, you'll be labelled a recluse, a snob, or, worst of all, peculiar. Your own stack of cards, freshly ordered from the stationer, sits waiting. Blank on the back, ready for desperate last-minute notes. "So sorry I missed you," or the occasional passive-aggressive flourish. "Regrets for last Tuesday, indisposed due to weather and fate." Now comes the strategy portion. Calling is not a casual stroll and knock. It is a precisely timed, logistically demanding social campaign. You must consult your visiting book, a small leather-bound ledger more detailed than your tax records. In this sacred tome, you track who called, when, and what degree of attention each visit deserves. Failure to reciprocate within the appropriate window means social death, so it's less keeping up with friends and more trying not to become a cautionary tale at someone else's tea. You set out in your best visiting dress, a garment specifically designed to signal you're only staying for 15 minutes, but are still better dressed than anyone in the household. Gloves, mandatory. Hat, obligatory. Parasol, defensive weapon and privacy shield. You climb into the family carriage, or, if you're particularly tragic, set off on foot, bracing yourself for a morning of small talk and sitting upright on sofas that seem to have been designed by orthopedic pessimists. Arriving at the first house, you're ushered into the drawing room by a servant who will, with a straight face, inform the lady of the house that Miss So-and-so is calling. If you're lucky, she's in. If not, you leave a card and move on, secretly relieved, but forced to pretend you're devastated at missing her. If she does appear, you're in for the real test. 15 minutes of conversation, as light as air and as sharp as a fencing match. Weather, health, mutual acquaintances, these are all safe topics. Politics, money, and your actual opinions are not. You sip tea, eat a biscuit so dry it could be used as packing material, and try not to drop crumbs down the front of your dress. If you can manage this while sitting with perfect posture and making eye contact just enough to seem interested, you are, by Victorian standards, thriving. And don't get comfortable. There's a precise choreography to social calls. Stay longer than 15 minutes, and you'll be seen as needy. Leave too soon, and you're cold. Ask to use the lavatory, and you might as well declare war on etiquette itself. On especially busy days, you'll squeeze in 6 or 7 calls, each one another opportunity to accidentally offend someone's third cousin twice removed. When you finally return home, it's time for the receiving portion. Now, you must be ready to greet callers with a smile, offer a small cake, and pretend you weren't just hiding in the library dreading human interaction. For every card you collect, another slot on your social to-do list is filled. The process never ends. It only resets. Somewhere, someone is always about to take offence, and every drawing room is a silent coliseum of reputation. In the end, the true winner of the Victorian social call is the one with the biggest stack of cards, the emptiest schedule, and the most finely honed ability to make it all look effortless, while secretly longing for a day with no visitors at all. Now it's time to sit by the window and embroider something you don't care about, while making just enough conversation to avoid accusations of sulking. Needlework isn't just a hobby, it's a silent competition for most patient martyr in your social circle. If you're picturing a peaceful morning, sunlight filtering gently through lace curtains as you lovingly stitch roses onto a handkerchief, let me stop you there. Needlework in the Victorian home is less a creative outlet and more a marathon of endurance, etiquette, and emotional suppression. It's the Victorian answer to both fidget spinners and passive aggression. Everyone is doing it, everyone is pretending to enjoy it, and everyone is quietly praying not to stab themselves with the business end of a tapestry needle. Your tools are neatly arranged on a side table. Embroidery hoops, thimbles, shears so sharp they could cut through family tension, and a rainbow of silk threads. There's an unfinished sampler nearby, featuring cheerful mottos like "Home Sweet Home" and "A Stitch in Time Saves 9", alongside what you secretly suspect is a coded cry for help. If you're truly accomplished, you might attempt an antimacassar, a lacy doily designed to protect the furniture from gentlemen's hair oil and, presumably, any remaining will to live. The pressure is on. Your mother and 3 aunts are present, all working with the intensity of Olympic athletes and the facial expressions of martyrs auditioning for sainthood. The conversation is light, calculated, and slightly barbed. How many stitches per minute are you managing, dear? That border is ambitious. My, your French knots are so rustic. The competition isn't explicit, but everyone knows who's winning. It's whoever looks the calmest while sewing an entire alphabet onto a napkin with eyesight so strained they're seeing double. But this is more than mere busywork. Needlework is the acceptable way for women to fill hours otherwise spent questioning the futility of existence, or worse, having opinions. While your fingers are occupied, you can eavesdrop on conversations, tune out tedious relatives, or perfect your serene and industrious expression for when the vicar drops by unannounced. If your embroidery is truly intricate, you have an excuse to avoid the more dangerous conversational topics, like marriage prospects or why you still haven't learned the pianoforte. Occasionally, someone will read aloud, improving literature only, of course, while the rest of you nod and try to avoid sewing a flower stem straight through your skirt. Novels are frowned upon, too racy. Poetry is risky. Too many feelings. So you end up listening to a selection from moral maxims for young ladies while you attempt to make a chain stitch that doesn't look like a worm having a panic attack. The unspoken rule is never to let your hands be idle. Idleness, after all, is the first step toward moral decay, or worse, being accused of laziness by your own grandmother. So you sew, handkerchiefs, table runners, mysterious sachets no one actually uses, and enough pillowcases to suffocate a small town. The ultimate goal? To create a trousseau, a chest full of embroidered linens, ready for the marriage you may or may not want, but are certainly expected to prepare for with the enthusiasm of someone packing for a trip to Siberia. But needlework has its dangers. Dropping your needle means crawling on your knees, hunting for the tiny saboteur before the housemaid's foot finds it first. Pricked fingers are a daily reality, often hidden with stoic dignity, or, if you're feeling dramatic, displayed with a sigh for maximum sympathy. There's also the looming threat of eye strain. Victorian women regularly went half-blind by age 40, but at least the antimacassars lived on. And through it all, you maintain a steady, slightly glazed smile. Because in the world of extreme embroidery, it's not about enjoying yourself. It's about surviving the endless afternoon, one tiny stitch at a time, and proving to everyone that, when it comes to patience, nobody suffers as beautifully as you. If you're lucky enough to steal an hour alone, you might read a novel, ideally something improving, unless you're feeling scandalous, and sneak a peek at the latest sensation novel. Be sure to hide it under a copy of Pilgrim's Progress for plausible deniability. Reading in Victorian England is a subversive act, especially for women. It's less a leisure activity and more a covert operation conducted with the stealth and paranoia of an undercover agent. You glance furtively at the door, ears tuned for the telltale creak of your mother's footsteps or the ominous clearing of a butler's throat. On the surface, you're sitting demurely in the corner, a copy of Moral Sentiments or the Young Lady's Guide to Etiquette open on your lap. But hidden behind its virtuous cover lurks something far juicier. Wilkie Collins, perhaps, or the latest serialized chapters of Lady Audley's Secret. You live on the edge. Of course, the reading material you select is a social statement in itself, improving books, biographies, sermons, treatises on botany are safe but dreary, much like boiled cabbage. These are the works you display proudly on your nightstand when guests come over, or when Great-Aunt Millicent visits and likes to quiz you on the finer points of Anglican morality. But deep down, you crave a bit more spice. A poem with an actual feeling. A novel with a heroine who faints less and does more. Or, on days when you're feeling particularly rebellious, a forbidden French novel translated by someone who clearly had no idea what the French were actually saying. Reading, of course, comes with rules. You must sit upright, ankles crossed, and look composed. The universal code for do not disturb, but also do not look like you're enjoying yourself too much. If you giggle, gasp, or let slip a scandalous blush, you risk alerting your chaperone, who will descend like a vulture to inspect your reading material for improper influences, emotional outbursts, or, worst of all, imagination. Sometimes you're expected to read aloud for the family, an experience best compared to dramatic hostage negotiation. You carefully choose passages devoid of romance, crime, or anything faintly suggestive. You're reading for the moral edification of the group, not for the secret thrill of a midnight tryst on the moors. Any deviation from this, such as a giggle at a double entendre, can and will be used against you in the court of family opinion. And yet, despite the scrutiny, reading is an escape. Within the pages of a well-thumbed novel, you can visit Italy, scale the Alps, or solve mysteries in foggy London, all without ever leaving the parlour. You can fall in love a dozen times before luncheon, commit daring acts of bravery, or, if you're particularly bored, imagine a world in which you wear trousers and make your own breakfast. Books are also contraband currency among your friends. You trade the racier ones beneath your embroidery hoops, pass notes about the best chapters, and argue in hushed tones over whether Mr. Darcy is in fact marriage material or just a glorified introvert with boundary issues. Some books are so infamous they're known only by code. The Blue Book is tucked behind the Atlas, while that dreadful French volume is hidden inside a hollowed-out copy of Prayers for Young Ladies. You become part of an underground library, operating with all the secrecy of a Victorian spy ring. And for all the rules, the real victory comes when you manage a full, unbothered hour with your favourite book. You curl up in a sunny window seat, lose yourself in someone else's drama, and, for a little while, forget that your own greatest challenge is not being caught drooling over a character with sideburns. When the hour is up, you mark your place, hide the evidence, and slip back into the world of improving pursuits, your spirit a little lighter and your appetite for mischief just slightly whetted. In the Victorian age, reading isn't just a pastime, it's a minor act of rebellion, a secret romance, and, if you're lucky, a glimpse of the world beyond the next social call. Sure, there are servants, but they don't actually run themselves. You're expected to direct a staff of humans who are all secretly convinced you have no idea what you're doing. You inspect the silverware, sample the soup, and try not to cry when you find dust on a banister. Household management in Victorian England is less gentle domesticity and more corporate governance with extra starch. Your day as domestic CEO starts not with a board meeting, but with the morning report, delivered via a long-suffering housekeeper who recites the latest updates as if announcing troop movements in the Crimea. The laundry has frozen on the line, the cook is out of patience, again, and the footman has been spotted napping in the coal scuttle. If you thought you were just here to swan about in lace and pearls, you've grossly underestimated the demands of this position. The staff roster reads like a Dickensian drama. Housemaids, parlourmaids, scullery maids, cooks, butlers, footmen, and the ever-cryptic odd boy. You are expected to know them all by name, remember their birthdays, and instantly recall who is currently holding a grudge against whom. Lose track, and you risk the sort of household mutiny that can only be resolved by bribery, usually with cake, and an emergency reference to Mrs. Beaton's book of household management. Your first task, the daily inspection. This is a stately procession from room to room, trailed by at least 2 maids and a cloud of anxiety. You check that beds are made with military precision, that the parlour cushions are fluffed to regulation density, and that no one, absolutely no one, has left muddy footprints on the staircase. Each infraction is noted with a sigh and a gentle correction, because if you raise your voice, the household will spend a week whispering about your nerves. Down in the kitchen, you taste test the soup, not for pleasure but as a safeguard against culinary revolution. If it's too salty, the cook glares at you like you've personally insulted her ancestors. If it's too bland, you're offered extra pepper with a smile sharp enough to slice bread. Menu planning becomes a diplomatic operation. What can you serve that's impressive, affordable, and unlikely to start a class war in the pantry? It's like Chopped, if the mystery ingredients were yesterday's turnips and fear. Managing the budget is a minefield. The household accounts are a labyrinth of receipts, IOUs, and ledgers written in handwriting that could be mistaken for ancient runes. You try to keep track of how much was spent on lamp oil, meat, and enough starch to make your napkins stand at attention. Heaven help you if you go over budget. Nothing triggers a crisis meeting with your husband quite like an unexpected shilling spent on extra coal. Then there's the drama. The maid who cries because the butler moved her broom. The footman with a mysterious injury. Fell on the silverware again. Madam. And the ongoing mystery of who keeps leaving half-eaten biscuits behind the clock. Every dispute is a test of your diplomatic skills. Your management style becomes a mix of mother, monarch, therapist, and benevolent dictator. Despite appearances, there is no downtime. You're on call for every crisis, every locked door, every mysterious stain on the drawing room carpet. Guests arrive, and you transform into a conductor, orchestrating a seamless ballet of greetings, refreshments, and strategically timed compliments about the weather. If the dinner goes smoothly and nobody sets the curtains on fire, you declare victory. All this, mind you, in layers of crinoline and stays, maintaining a pleasant smile and never once admitting you'd rather be hiding under the stairs with the cat. So the next time someone says, "But you have help," remember, you're not relaxing, you're running an empire, with dust bunnies for rebels and a soup ladle as your scepter. Congratulations, you're a CEO, and your quarterly report is due whenever your mother-in-law drops by unannounced. Your main daily workout is conversational fencing, parrying intrusive questions, delivering just the right amount of wit, and never ever admitting you don't care about the weather. Every interaction is a masterclass in not offending anyone who could destroy your social standing with a single raised eyebrow. Let's be clear, the real battleground of Victorian society isn't fought with swords or even with soup spoons, but with language. The ability to say everything and nothing at once is the most valuable skill a woman can possess. The game is subtle. If chess had more lace and fewer actual moves, it would be Victorian conversation. You're not just speaking, you're deploying a shield of propriety, a veil of pleasantries, and, when things get desperate, a diversionary barrage of flower talk. You start your morning with warm-up sparring, trading polite compliments with your family over breakfast, each one edged with just a hint of subtext. "You're looking very well, dear." Translation: "I see you survived the corset again. Did you sleep well?" Code for: "I heard every floorboard creak and know you snuck that novel under your pillow." Every question is a riddle, every answer a tiny diplomatic incident waiting to happen. As you move into the social day, the stakes rise. The drawing room is your ring. Here you face a parade of friends, relatives, and that one neighbor who is, frankly, more interested in your laundry line than your opinions. Topics are strictly regulated. The weather is always safe, unless, of course, it's raining and someone's new bonnet has wilted, in which case the mood may turn icy. Gardening is a perennial favorite, but beware. Praising the wrong rosebush could lead to an entire afternoon of passive-aggressive horticultural warfare. Wit is a necessity, but only in measured doses. Too clever, and you risk being labelled fast. Too dull, and you're insipid. The key is to drop just enough amusing observations to prove you have a mind, but not enough to suggest you might actually use it for anything dangerous, like having your own ideas. Practice phrases such as, "How droll," and "Isn't that extraordinary?" which work for nearly every occasion, from hearing about a neighbour's new carriage to listening to a recitation about turnips. And then come the conversational traps. Someone asks, "When will you visit Bath this year?" What they really mean. "Why haven't you left town yet?" A well-meaning aunt inquires about your embroidery. Is it finished? But the correct answer is always, "Soon, aunt. Thank you for asking, never I'd rather eat the needle." The art is to answer without answering, to reply without revealing, and, above all, to avoid giving anyone anything truly interesting to repeat. But conversation isn't just about defense, it's about offense too. Deploy a strategic compliment and you can raise your standing. Your daughter's pianoforte playing is coming along beautifully. Works even if the performance last night sounded like two cats in a bagpipe. Offer a subtle redirect when topics stray into dangerous territory. "Oh, what a lovely vase. Was that from your trip to the seaside?" If all else fails, summon a coughing fit. Drop a teacup or feign intense interest in the wallpaper. The greatest danger, of course, is accidental scandal. One misplaced joke, one unguarded opinion, and your reputation could be shredded by the next post. A cousin's careless mention of a novel could turn into a family crisis. Disagreeing with a vicar, laughing too loudly, or being seen alone with the wrong relative can all end with you as the main course at the next gossip feast. The solution? Smile, nod, and remember. Silence is sometimes the sharpest retort. At the end of a day spent dancing around conversational landmines, you're exhausted, mentally sharper than a barrister, but emotionally drained. You've kept your secrets, delivered compliments, avoided all mention of politics, and managed not to admit that you actually don't care if it rains or not. Congratulations. You have mastered the art of Victorian conversation, saying everything required and nothing at all, in 4 syllables or less. Physical fitness isn't about getting swole, it's about gliding slowly in circles while pretending not to be bored. Walking outside is allowed, if you're chaperoned, bundled up, and impervious to heckling from street urchins. Victorian exercise is less about burning calories and more about burning daylight in the most graceful way possible. The phrase, "taking a turn around the room," doesn't mean anything as radical as jazzercise or even speed walking. It means just that. You rise from your needlework, collect your skirts, and begin pacing the perimeter of the largest available room, drawing room, music room, or, for the ambitious, the long gallery, at a stately 2 miles per century. This is not about heart health. It's about appearing faintly winded but never actually perspiring. Of course, you're not alone in your indoor lapse. Your mother, sisters, and at least one cousin have joined the procession, making the whole affair look like the world's most lethargic conga line. Conversation must be light, volume must be low, and posture must be impeccable. Slouching is for the weak, or worse, for the French. You glance at your reflection in the mirror every half lap to confirm that your hair is still pinned, and your expression is set to pleasantly occupied, even as your soul begs for a treadmill and noise-cancelling headphones. If you tire of this endless oval, you may be permitted a walk outside, weather and respectability permitting. This involves a process only slightly less elaborate than preparing for a polar expedition. First, you must find a chaperone, a requirement that ensures you are protected from both the elements and any lurking malevolent bachelors. Then comes the layering: shawl, gloves, bonnet, overcoat, and the ever-essential parasol. The goal is to emerge into the daylight as a mobile stack of wool and ribbons, with only a sliver of face visible between your hat brim and scarf. Once outside, the air is brisk and bracing, and so are the judgments from every passing neighbour. A successful walk means returning home neither flushed nor dishevelled, with not a strand of hair out of place and your boots only lightly besmirched by mud. Should you venture further, perhaps to the park or down the promenade, you'll be joined by other women on identical missions, everyone silently pretending this counts as sport while exchanging glances that say, "If I trip on this cobblestone and land in a puddle, just let me drown." And don't forget the ever-watchful eyes of small children and street urchins who provide running colour commentary. "Look at her hat, miss! Careful, don't fall asleep on your feet!" You keep your chin high and glide past, pretending not to notice. In a way, it's a training exercise for your social skills as much as your legs. Should you be of a more daring disposition, there are alternatives. Croquet on the lawn is allowed, provided you don't swing the mallet with undue enthusiasm. If you're a true rebel, you might go for a brisk ride on horseback, but even that's best done at a dignified walk and under strict supervision. Anything more strenuous risks sweating, and sweating is strictly forbidden except in private, darkened rooms with a doctor's note. Ultimately, Victorian exercise is about the illusion of activity. You return home, cheeks only slightly pink, posture even straighter, and claim you feel refreshed. Code for thank goodness that's over. No gym membership required, just 400 yards of polished floor, and the iron will not to die of boredom. You retire to your seat, heart rate unchanged, and quietly wonder if walking in circles is an allegory for Victorian life itself. Plenty of movement, but never really going anywhere. And just like that, you've had your exercise for the day, without breaking a sweat or a single rule. Afternoon means music practice, piano, harp, or singing, ideally all three, and ideally badly. Every missed note is a reminder that your true value is measured in social grace, not musical ability. Victorian music practice is less budding virtuoso and more sonic wallpaper. The family expects the gentle plinking of a pianoforte drifting from the parlour, as much a sign of middle-class respectability as lace curtains or a solid supply of potted ferns. You, however, approach the piano with all the enthusiasm of someone going to their own execution, albeit an execution with sheet music and an audience of judgmental relatives. The piano itself is a Victorian marvel, upright, shiny, and perpetually out of tune due to the fluctuating English weather. You sit, back rigid, ankles crossed, hands perfectly poised, at least until you hit your first wrong note, at which point your younger sibling sighs with the theatrical disappointment of a thwarted critic. You labour through scales, your fingers fumbling over runs that sound like a small animal trying to escape through the keys. Your music teacher, if present, leans over you and taps the sheet music with a pencil, somehow conveying both patience and deep existential pain. The same goes for harp or singing. The harp is an instrument designed by someone who really hated other people's backs. You attempt a simple melody and quickly realize the sound you're making is less angelic serenade and more cat wrestling a laundry line. As for singing, you project your voice with all the courage of someone who knows Aunt Gertrude is listening from the next room, ears sharpened by decades of amateur dramatics and dashed hopes. Mistakes are inevitable. Wrong note? Blame the weather. Missed beat? The sheet music must have shifted. Discordant chord? Clearly the piano's fault. In Victorian life, it's not about achieving musical perfection. It's about demonstrating the correct blend of effort, humility, and a willingness to be gently humiliated. If you're a prodigy, wonderful. If not, smile and hope nobody remembers your attempt at Greensleeves. Music, after all, is about cultivating the right reputation. You play for guests, for family, for anyone who will listen, or at least pretend to. Your reward for surviving another round of the Blue Danube is a flurry of polite applause and a mild suggestion to practice a little more, dear. You may secretly dream of burning the sheet music and moving to Paris to become a cabaret singer, but you know better. In Victorian England, modest suffering is always preferable to open rebellion. And just in case you thought you could escape, every respectable young lady is expected to play at least one instrument. Bonus points for two, or for pretending to enjoy a little light composition, usually in the form of a waltz that sounds suspiciously like the last three waltzes. You might swap music with friends, all while maintaining the delicate fiction that your hand occasionally slips into a more daring piece, like a forbidden polka. If you are particularly unlucky, there's a family recital. The drawing room is rearranged, the good chairs are polished, and the entire household is summoned to witness your battle with Beethoven. The applause is always polite, the criticism always veiled. You played with such feeling, darling. Perhaps a little less next time. When the ordeal is finally over, you close the lid of the piano with a sigh of relief, fingers tingling and pride, only slightly bruised. You survived. You may never be invited to the Royal Albert Hall, but at least you managed not to break a string or accidentally start a poker riot. Congratulations, you have fulfilled your duty as the living soundtrack of the Victorian home. And if you ever doubt your worth, just remember, nobody ever judged a young lady for playing too quietly but playing too well. That's practically a scandal. Keeping up with your friends and family means writing endless letters, each longer than a modern novel and about as interesting as reading the instructions for a foot bath. Stationery sales must be through the roof. If you thought modern texting was exhausting, welcome to the Victorian world, where catching up involves several hours of penmanship, half a bottle of ink, and the looming threat of hand cramps so severe you start envying the family dog. Every acquaintance, every cousin, and every distant godmother expects a handwritten update delivered with maximum flourish and zero spelling errors. In an age before autocorrect, every letter you send is a potential public relations disaster, a minor literary epic that will be scrutinized, saved, and, if you're truly unlucky, read aloud at future family gatherings. You begin by selecting the right paper. This is no ordinary notebook page. We're talking creamy, monogrammed sheets stored in a box, so elegant it practically hisses at your sloppy penmanship. Ink must be black, or possibly blue-black if you're feeling racy. The quill, because yes, it's still fashionable to use one, must be sharpened to a point so precise it could double as a surgical implement. Heaven help you if you blot. Even a tiny smudge will haunt you for weeks. The first challenge, the salutation. Dearest cousin Arabella, I trust this letter finds you in the best of health, and Spirit's Victorian etiquette requires the opening paragraph to be both flowery and utterly devoid of actual information. 10 lines in, you've covered the weather, the state of your mother's nerves, and the remarkable resilience of your houseplants. You haven't even reached the reason for your letter yet. Next, the body of the message. This is where the real sport begins. You must recount all major events, visitors, illnesses, dances attended, marriages proposed, marriages rejected, servants hired, servants fired, and if you're truly desperate, the relative excitement of a new tablecloth. Each detail is spun out like an episode of a soap opera, only with more passive-aggressive asides. Mrs. Worthington's tea was a great success, though some might say her lemon cakes were more ambitious than edible. Translation, I barely survived, please send help. But the real purpose of letter writing is information management. You want to keep your friends close, your relatives closer, and your enemies confused. Subtle boasts are woven into humble brags. I have been quite busy with my needlework, as my sampler for Lady Highmore's charity will be displayed at the county fair. You carefully avoid mentioning that you stabbed yourself with the embroidery needle no fewer than 6 times. Halfway through page 3, your hand is aching, your ink is running out, and you've developed a new respect for the humble abbreviation. Unfortunately, there's no such thing as LOL in Victorian correspondence. Every sentence is a complete thought. Every emotion is painstakingly spelled out. If you need to include a joke, it must be disguised as an anecdote about your neighbour's goose. Pray forgive my poor jest, but I could not help but laugh when... Then there's the closing. Victorian etiquette books recommend at least 4 complimentary phrases. With fondest affection, your ever-devoted friend, I remain as always your humble servant, and, for good measure, may Providence smile upon you and yours. By the end, your signature is barely legible, and your hand is shaking like a carriage on a country road. The letter is finally finished, but you're not done yet. You must fold it just so, address the envelope with calligraphy that would impress a monk, seal it with a dab of wax, monogrammed, obviously, and hand it off to a footman for posting. No instant delivery here. Your words will travel by carriage, rail, and sheer force of etiquette. And then, the cycle repeats. Each letter answered spawns 3 more in reply, each longer and more oblique than the last. You begin to suspect this is how Victorians secretly trained for marathons, not with running, but with relentless correspondence. Congratulations. You've completed your daily Victorian texting workout. No emojis required. Just the faint, lingering ache of carpal tunnel and the hope that, maybe, next week, someone will invent the postcard. At some point, you must face the drawing room, where everyone gathers to judge each other's clothes, gossip, and display an uncanny ability to sip tea without ever blinking. It's like a silent auction for social status, and you're the lot everyone's inspecting. Welcome to the daily social gauntlet. The drawing room is the Victorian answer to the modern group chat, only everyone is much more overdressed and the read receipts are delivered by the arch of an eyebrow. There is a careful choreography to the afternoon assembly. You enter with the poise of someone walking onto the stage at the world's least exciting pageant. You smile just enough to appear approachable, but not so much that anyone suspects you're plotting your escape. Seats are selected with all the political calculation of a parliamentary debate. Too near the fireplace? You're accused of hogging the warmth? Too close to the window? You're either fishing for compliments about your complexion or eavesdropping on the gardener. The safest position is a sturdy armchair, preferably one with a direct sightline to the tea tray, and at least 2 exit routes. Once seated, the real games begin. The first event, wardrobe scrutiny. Everyone subtly inspects everyone else's attire. Bonnets are assessed, shawls ranked, and buttons quietly counted. Your dress is last year's shade of mauve, risky. Your hemline is a 1/4 inch too high. Expect an avalanche of side-eye from Mrs. Henley, who still remembers your infamous ankle incident at the garden party. Tea is served with military efficiency. The hostess pours, never spilling a drop, her hands steady despite the simmering tension in the air. Biscuits are passed around, each taken with a thank you murmured so softly it might as well be telepathy. You try not to crumble your shortbread in your lap. Last week's misstep is still the talk of 3 counties. And then the conversation derby. Topics are chosen with the precision of a surgeon. The weather, the roses, the subtle drama of Lady Bracknell's missing parakeet. The challenge is to say as much as possible while revealing as little as necessary. Any mention of money, illness, or, heaven forbid, personal feelings is met with the kind of silence usually reserved for funerals. If someone does let slip a piece of juicy gossip, it's quickly camouflaged with a bland observation about the price of coal or a deep dive into the nuances of embroidery floss. Children, if present, are expected to be seen and not heard. They hover by the door, desperate for escape, like interns at a board meeting who haven't had lunch. Elderly relatives doze with one eye open, always ready to spring into action should someone attempt to mention politics. All the while, there is a constant, silent contest. Who can appear the most unbothered? It's a battle waged with posture, eye contact, and the ability to eat a biscuit without scattering crumbs on the carpet. One poorly timed yawn, and you risk a full week of concerned comments about your health. And, of course, there's the gossip gauntlet. Information is traded in whispers and sidelong glances. Who's engaged, who's fallen ill, who had the audacity to laugh too loudly in church. The stories are embroidered with every retelling, until what began as an innocent walk in the park is transformed into a tale of social ruin, and possibly a duel. When the tea grows cold, and the conversation has circled back to the weather for the third time, it's time to make your exit. This too is a dance. Leave too soon and you're rude, linger too long and you're desperate. The trick is to glide out with a nod, a soft farewell, and the faintest suggestion that you have more interesting engagements awaiting you. You survived the drawing room. You're exhausted, over-caffeinated, and slightly sore from sitting up straight for 2 hours. But you did it. You faced the social corral and emerged with your reputation mostly intact. In Victorian life, that's as close to winning as it gets. Need a new bonnet or a discreet bottle of hair tonic? Time to venture into public and spend an hour pretending you're not shocked by the price of ribbon. Be careful. Shopkeepers can smell hesitation and social anxiety a mile away. Victorian shopping is not, as modern magazines would have you believe, an exercise in personal freedom and self-expression. It's a delicate, nerve-wracking public ritual with the atmosphere of a high-stakes poker game and the price tags to match. Your day begins with a list written in your finest handwriting: bonnet, gloves, a spool of thread, possibly some Turkish delight if you're feeling both daring and flush. Your mother double-checks your list and then, just to be safe, cross-examines you on the difference between suitable and showy trimmings. Before you even leave the house, there's preparation. You must dress shopping appropriate, which means your best walking dress, gloves, and an expression that says, "I might purchase the shop, but I'm also not above haggling over a thimble." Any hint of shabbiness, and you risk being ignored by staff, or, even worse, receiving a lecture on the virtues of thrift from Mrs. Dunsworthy, who is definitely eavesdropping from behind a mountain of lace doilies. Once outside, you join the river of shoppers on the bustling high street, each as anxious as you, all pretending not to notice one another's bonnet choices. Your chaperone hovers like a security detail, armed with both moral authority and a keen eye for gossip. The shop windows glint with displays of temptation, velvet ribbons, feathered hats, and mysterious bottles promising everything from luminous skin to a husband within a fortnight. Inside the shop, the real games begin. The shopkeeper stands behind the counter, already sizing you up. Are you a serious customer, or just here for the free sample of lavender water? Do you have enough pocket money to afford the good lace? Or should you be gently directed toward the remnants bin? Your hands tremble slightly as you request just a little ribbon, please, and you try not to gasp when you hear the price, roughly the cost of a week's coal or 3 months of lower back pain from needlework. Shopping for a bonnet, for instance, is a diplomatic minefield. The assistant produces options at the speed of light, each more elaborate than the last, while subtly hinting that last season's styles are better for practical ladies. You nod sagely, as if you've always known that green velvet is for the ambitious, while blue silk is for the reserved. You try on bonnets, peer into a slightly warped mirror, and pretend to deliberate while your chaperone quietly prays you don't choose anything that could get you noticed for the wrong reasons, like, say, a feather. But it's not just fashion. Every purchase is a social statement. Choose a flamboyant ribbon, and you risk the raised eyebrow of the milliner and a minor scandal in the neighborhood. Select plain brown gloves, and everyone will assume you're in mourning, or worse, economy mode. The safest path is to choose something modest, pay in exact change, and hope the shopkeeper doesn't try to upsell you on a very popular new hair tonic. No, you do not want your hair to smell like violets and existential dread. Every transaction is followed by a torrent of guilt. Did you just spend too much? Is your family's budget in ruins? Is it frivolous to own 2 pairs of gloves in the same lifetime? You leave the shop with your package wrapped in brown paper and a sudden urge to apologize to your father, your bank account, and possibly your future descendants. Back on the street, the sun seems a little brighter, the other shoppers a little less intimidating. You walk home clutching your treasures, cheeks pink from both exertion and economic anxiety. Shopping, you realize, is the ultimate Victorian tightrope. One wrong purchase, and you're a cautionary tale. One right purchase, and you'll hear about it for years. You return home, drop your packages on the hall table, and swear never to shop again, at least until the next sale on ostrich feathers. Retail therapy, Victorian edition. Maximum guilt, minimal pleasure, and at least 3 fresh stories for the drawing room. Tea is less about hydration and more about surviving a gauntlet of cakes, rules, and relatives who want to know when you're getting married. No, you may not have another scone unless you also accept a full serving of personal critique. In the Victorian household, afternoon tea is not a break. It's an institution, a delicately orchestrated social obstacle course, the likes of which would terrify even the most seasoned athlete. You enter the drawing room, greeted by the gentle rattle of porcelain, the sweet, menacing aroma of fresh cake, and a room full of relatives who appear to have nothing on their minds except your future, your waistline, and the correct way to eat a cucumber sandwich. First, the seating arrangements. Aunt Bertha always claims the chair closest to the tea tray, ready to intercept the first, and, crucially, the largest slice of cake. You try to sit somewhere safe, not so close that you're a prime target for questions, but not so far away that you look like you're hiding, even if you are. The youngest children hover by the plate of jam tarts, ready to pounce as soon as the adults look away. Everyone else perches on the edge of their seat, alert, composed, and quietly calculating the best route to the scones. Then comes the tea itself. A ritual so precise, it makes high mass look spontaneous. The hostess paws, one eye on the teapot, the other on her guests, ready to spot anyone who dares request sugar before milk, a faux pas only slightly less serious than tax evasion. You accept your cup with a polite nod, stir exactly 3 times, and sip without slurping, no matter how scalding. Woe betide anyone who dunks a biscuit when Aunt Bertha is present. Dunking, in her view, is the first step toward total societal collapse. The food, meanwhile, is both a treat and a trap. Plates appear with neat rows of sandwiches, crusts cut off, fillings suspiciously bland, and pyramids of scones dusted with enough powdered sugar to conceal the taste of mild disappointment. The cake selection is impressive, but woe unto you if you take a slice larger than your allotted share. Every bite is watched, every crumb judged, every second scone silently noted by the family's resident calorie counter. But tea isn't just about eating. It's about conversation, or, more accurately, being interrogated in front of an audience. As soon as your mouth is full, Aunt Bertha pounces. So, dear, when are you getting married? Translation: I've been waiting since you turned 16. Have you considered Lord Dalrymple? He's got a lovely income for someone so plain. Translation: My matchmaking skills are the only thing standing between you and spinsterhood. You deflect politely with practiced evasions. Oh, I'm quite busy with my needlework, Aunt. Such lovely weather we've been having, don't you think? Is that a thrush in the garden? Any distraction will do. Meanwhile, your cousins smirk over their teacups, having already survived their own round of questioning, or, better yet, having married off and become the interrogators themselves. If the conversation lulls, someone always brings up the latest local scandal, a runaway maid, a neighbour's dog caught digging up the roses, or, heaven help you, your own supposed interest in the vicar's nephew. The gossip swirls with the steam from the teapot, sweetened with sugar and spite. And yet, somehow, you survive. The scones are eaten, the cake is conquered, and Aunt Bertha, temporarily satisfied, redirects her attention to critiquing someone else's posture. You make your escape as soon as is polite, your nerves rattled but intact, vowing never to attend tea again until tomorrow, when the whole spectacle repeats. Afternoon tea, where hydration is optional but survival is absolutely mandatory. Your afternoons are reserved for good works, which mostly involve sitting in cold church halls, pretending to care about orphans, and sewing things no orphan has ever asked for. Victorian charity is less about transforming lives and more about transforming your reputation. In a world where idleness is the first step to disgrace and self-improvement is everyone's second job, doing good becomes an elaborate public performance. The destination is always the same, the local church or parish hall, where the temperature is best described as spiritual refrigeration and the decor is mostly folding chairs, stern portraits, and a faint odour of damp wool. You arrive promptly, your arms laden with an impressive array of half-finished knitting, yards of calico, and at least one copy of uplifting moral lessons for the young. Around you, a circle of women settles into the serious business of relieving suffering, which mostly means discussing who's more deserving, the deserving poor versus the merely unfortunate, and which family's children need the most knitted socks. Actual orphans are nowhere to be seen, presumably off living their best lives, free from scratchy blankets and unsolicited advice. The first order of business is always a meeting, led by the vicar's wife or the town's most fearsome matron. Minutes are read, plans are made, and you debate the logistics of the annual charity bazaar, a labyrinth of bunting, baked goods, and hand-embroidered bookmarks. Someone suggests a cake stall. Someone else objects on the grounds that last year's fruitcake nearly caused a dental emergency. Someone proposes a raffle. A third objects, worried it might encourage gambling in the lower orders. Sewing commences. You're assigned to hem pillowcases for the parish hospital or stitch initials into comforters destined for unknown recipients. You wonder privately if any of these items ever reach their supposed destination, or if they're simply accumulating in the vicarage attic, waiting for the next round of well-meaning volunteers. Nobody asks the orphans what they actually want. Certainly not another itchy scarf. Of course, the real reason everyone is here is the company. The sewing circle is less a humanitarian machine and more an elite social network with extra buttons. Over the gentle click of knitting needles, local news and global scandals are exchanged in hushed tones. Did you hear about Miss Fairchild's unfortunate run-in with the milkman? Lady Prescott's new hat is positively sinful. And, of course, has anyone seen the curate lately? He seemed rather pale. If you're feeling rebellious, you drop hints of foreign charities. Starving children in Crimea, orphans in Ireland, but these are met with polite nods and a swift return to the latest scandal in town. There is always one woman who takes her charity work a bit too seriously. She brings charts, organises competitions for most handkerchiefs produced, and once suggested a home visit to personally deliver socks to a widower, which everyone agrees was taking things a bit far. You, meanwhile, struggle to keep your stitches even while stifling yawns and occasionally pricking your finger just to feel alive. At the end of the afternoon, there's tea, lukewarm and poured from a chipped pot, accompanied by stale biscuits and a speech about the virtue of self-sacrifice. You nod sagely, resisting the urge to ask if you could sacrifice yourself straight into a warm bath. The vicar thanks everyone for their dedication. Someone makes a joke about ladies of leisure, and you gather your sewing and slip away, cheeks pink from the combination of mild achievement and maximal boredom. Congratulations, another afternoon spent saving the world, one pointless hem at a time. You may never see the results of your good works, but you've certainly given the town something to talk about. Until next week's meeting. If you're a mother, aunt, or unfortunate older sister, you're in charge of small children with large opinions. This involves corralling, bribing, and negotiating peace treaties with people who still believe in the tooth fairy. Victorian children may look angelic in their tiny sailor suits and starched pinafores, but don't be fooled. They're pint-sized bundles of chaos with the stamina of marathon runners and the negotiation skills of a Victorian barrister. The day begins early, usually with shrieks from the nursery that indicate someone's eaten their wax fruit or, more likely, decided to see if their doll floats in the commode. The nursery is your battlefield, and your weapons are limited. Stern looks, empty threats, and a bracingly large jar of barley sugar. The nanny is technically in charge, but if you're the closest adult, or worse, the only adult present, you become the final authority on all disputes, injuries, and crises of conscience. You are judge, jury, and, on very bad days, amateur medic with a bottle of lavender water and a vague knowledge of leeches. Morning activities require careful planning. Unstructured time is an invitation for disaster, so you assign tasks with military efficiency. Alphabet blocks for the eldest, hoops and sticks for the middling ones, and for the smallest, supervised, staring at the family cat. Everyone has a job. No one, not even the cat, wants to do it. Breakfast is a test of patience and diplomacy. You try to coax porridge into tiny mouths while fending off complaints about lumps, temperature, and the existential question of why there's never any jam. At least 2 cups are overturned, someone's toast ends up under the table, and a minor insurrection erupts when you reveal there will be no honey until after lessons. If you escape breakfast without porridge in your hair or jam on your cuffs, you're already ahead. Lessons begin, and suddenly every child in the room is a master of distraction. Math is met with tears, spelling with rebellion, and anything French with the sort of terror usually reserved for rabid animals. You've never seen anyone develop an allergy to copybooks quite so suddenly. Half the time, you're not sure if you're teaching the alphabet or refereeing a slow-motion brawl over who gets the good slate. Outdoors is next. Victorian wisdom says children need fresh air and exercise, preferably somewhere the neighbours can judge your parenting. You bundle the children into coats, hats, gloves, and on bad days, scarves so thick they resemble fashion-forward snowmen. The walk to the park is an adventure. Puddles are magnets, dogs are irresistible, and everyone wants to collect the sort of stick that would make a Victorian mother faint dead away. If it rains, which this being England it does, the children are confined to the playroom, where their creativity blossoms in the form of elaborate schemes, secret clubs, and the occasional, highly illegal game of indoor cricket. You spend the afternoon mediating disputes, resolving treaties, and occasionally bribing peace with extra biscuits. By late afternoon, spirits are high and tempers are short. You read stories, play shadow puppets, and hope the tales of moral virtue somehow seep in via osmosis. The children are finally handed back to the nanny for the ceremonial evening scrub, a process that results in clean faces, damp carpets, and, on one memorable occasion, a missing frog. Supervision is less about maintaining order and more about surviving until bedtime without losing your voice, your mind, or your last piece of toffee. Victorian children, with their lace collars and impish grins, are both your greatest joy and your greatest trial. You emerge from the nursery frazzled but victorious, ready for adult conversation and, if you're lucky, a few minutes of actual peace. Until tomorrow, when the battle resumes, and the tiny humans, with their opinions, their questions, and their remarkable aim with a spoon, rise again. Single? Lucky you. Every social event is a minefield of eligible bachelors, awkward dances, and mysterious stains on your gloves. You must appear charming, interested, and absolutely not desperate, even if your future depends on it. The Victorian marriage market is, essentially, a high-stakes game of chess played in petticoats, with the added bonus of everyone's mother watching from the sidelines. From the moment you're declared out in society, every outing, tea, or garden stroll becomes a strategic opportunity for romantic advancement, or, just as likely, social catastrophe. Let's start with introductions. You meet potential suitors in settings designed to maximize awkwardness. A cousin's garden party, the annual church bazaar, or a ball where the lighting is dim enough to blur unfortunate facial features but bright enough to make any clumsy footwork excruciatingly obvious. Every eligible bachelor is introduced with a summary of his prospects. Has a small estate in Sussex, from a very good family, or, sometimes, remarkably proficient at whist. None of these details guarantee an interesting conversation or a future free from marital regret. The dance floor is where true personalities are revealed. You must navigate a maze of quadrilles and waltzes while avoiding direct eye contact with anyone's mother. A misstep could mean scandal, or, even worse, a proposal from Mr. Weatherspoon, who smells faintly of turnip and has not blinked since Michaelmas. Your gloves collect mysterious marks, ink, jam, possibly regret, while you strive to look effortlessly radiant and not at all like you just had to fend off a second cousin twice removed. Then comes the parlour conversation, where suitors attempt wit and you are expected to laugh at the right moment, all while secretly wondering if good teeth and a steady income are really enough to build a life on. The etiquette is exhausting. Flirtation must be obvious enough to signal interest, but subtle enough to avoid censure. A misplaced giggle or a slightly too bold comment can become tomorrow's drawing room gossip. If you're not careful, you might find yourself seated next to a bachelor who insists on describing his collection of beetles for an hour straight. Congratulations. You're courting disaster in the literal sense. There are also the letters, exchanged furtively under the watchful eyes of chaperones. Each note is an exercise in coded language, since saying too much or too little can lead to rumours, misunderstandings, or a very awkward conversation with your mother. You treasure a single pressed flower between pages, or decode whether sincerely yours means actual affection or just good penmanship. Your family, naturally, is watching your every move. Your mother has a sixth sense for sniffing out unsuitable matches, while your father's only requirement is that your suitor not bankrupt the family or accidentally set fire to the stables. Aunt Bertha, meanwhile, has a running tally of eligible men and is not above introducing you to all of them in one afternoon. The stakes feel impossibly high. One wrong choice and you're on the shelf, doomed to a life of perpetual embroidery and helping with other people's children. Every moment is a balancing act. Look interested, but not desperate. Be witty, but not too witty. Show off your embroidery, but don't appear too industrious, lest you look like you're angling for a job instead of a husband. You dream of a partner who sees you as more than your dowry or your lineage, but you settle for one who can make conversation about something other than livestock. Occasionally, a truly decent suitor appears, kind, moderately handsome, and with only a mild tendency to sweat through his cravat. Maybe he even asks you about your own interests, or shares a love of novels. But blink, and you'll miss your chance. The Victorian dating pool is more puddle than pond, and competition is fierce. In the end, surviving the suitor gauntlet is less about finding true love, and more about dodging disaster with your dignity intact. If you come through with only a few awkward proposals, some ambiguous poetry, and all your gloves returned, consider yourself a champion of the age-old game of Victorian courtship. The real Olympic sport of Victorian life is not slipping up and causing a scandal. This involves navigating the minefield of rules about hats, gloves, letters, unchaperoned walks, and being seen with the wrong cousin at the wrong time. Welcome to the art of Victorian self-preservation, where one false move can turn you from a respectable young lady into an afternoon's cautionary tale faster than you can say cream of celery. Scandal lurks behind every lace curtain. To avoid it, you must maintain a level of vigilance that would make a secret agent weep. First, the dress code. Hats must be worn outside, but heaven help you if you forget to remove yours indoors. Gloves are required for any outing, yes, even just a quick stroll in the garden. If you're caught bare-handed, expect a week's worth of speculation about your wild tendencies. Buttons must be fastened, shoelaces tied, and, most importantly, nothing, absolutely nothing, should ever hint at an ankle. Then there are the rules about correspondence. Letters to men must be ruthlessly chaperoned. If you receive a note, it must be passed through the hands of your mother, the butler, and probably the entire village before you can safely read it. Even the ink colour is up for judgment. Black is proper, blue is daring, and anything scented will have the drawing room in uproar by supper. Don't even think about sealing with a kiss, unless your goal is to have your romantic aspirations discussed over tea for the next decade. Chaperones themselves are an entire scandal prevention industry. Want to go for a walk? Bring a chaperone. Want to visit a friend? Chaperone. Want to blink at a man in public? Better hope your great aunt is within arm's reach. ready to leap between you and disaster. The unchaperoned walk is the original forbidden fruit, one bite, and your reputation is in tatters. Never mind that your only companion was a very well-behaved sheepdog. Dining is its own minefield. A single faux pas at the table can end your social standing. Soup must be sipped, not slurped. Bread is to be broken, not cut. Napkins go in your lap, never, under any circumstances, tucked into your collar like some kind of continental radical. And for goodness sake, don't let your spoon clatter, or someone will whisper about your nerves. But the real danger lies in being seen. Seen with the wrong person, at the wrong time, in the wrong place. A stroll with a second cousin after sunset is enough to send the rumour mill into overdrive. Two unmarried people talking in a conservatory? Scandal. Being caught laughing too loudly with the vicar's nephew? Double scandal. And possibly an unplanned engagement. If you're truly unfortunate, your scandal might not even be your fault. A sneeze during a church service, a trip over your skirt in the high street, or an unfortunate incident involving a runaway bonnet can all earn you a place in the social penalty box. Damage control is an essential skill. Apologies must be swift, humble, and, ideally, delivered by your mother. You'll need to perfect the "it was all a misunderstanding" face and develop an extensive vocabulary of vague explanations. Sometimes, you just have to wait it out. Scandal has the shelf life of fresh milk, and sooner or later, someone else will trip over the garden hose or drop their reticule in the duck pond. The cruelest part? Scandal is rarely about what you actually did. It's about what people think you might have done. Guilt by association, suspicion by proximity. The best you can hope for is to make it to the end of the season with your dignity, your dance card, and your reputation intact. So you tiptoe through the day, gloved, chaperoned and wary of soup, knowing that at any moment, history might remember you as the girl who set the standard for social exile, with nothing more than an untimely sneeze and a slightly risque bonnet ribbon. Victorian life. Come for the tea. Stay for the daily obstacle course. Evening brings the main event, dinner. It's a 3-hour parade of courses, each more baffling than the last. You'll be expected to keep up with both the cutlery and the conversation, while never admitting you don't like aspic. Victorian dinner isn't just a meal. It's an ordeal, a grand, glittering performance that puts every family member's acting skills to the test. By the time you sit down, you've already survived a wardrobe change, a pre-dinner sherry, and at least one stern lecture on the correct way to fold a napkin. Now, poised at the edge of a table long enough to land a small plane, you are both guest and exhibit. The first challenge? The place setting. There are more forks than you have fingers, an intimidating array of spoons, and at least 3 knives, each meant for a different, equally mysterious dish. You've studied the etiquette books, so you know to work from the outside in, but there's always a rogue implement, usually the fish fork, lurking, waiting to expose you as a culinary imposter. Water glasses glint accusingly, bread plates taunt you from your left, or maybe your right, depending on who last rearranged the table. And then the parade begins. Course after course arrives, each more elaborate and inexplicable than the last. Soup, served at the temperature of molten lava, is sipped silently, with the utmost restraint. Fish follows, usually accompanied by a sauce that's either exquisite or alarming. And you never know which until it's too late. There's roast of something, a mysterious pie, a selection of vegetables boiled into submission, and, if you're truly unlucky, a wobbly, suspiciously jiggling mound of aspic that everyone pretends to enjoy. Conversation is as complex as the menu. The hostess leads, artfully steering discussion towards safe topics, the weather, the latest news from abroad, or the subtle triumphs of the hydrangeas in the West Garden. The men argue about politics in polite monotones, while the women exchange coded compliments. Your dress is so unique this season. You are expected to laugh, nod, and contribute exactly the right amount, not too much, lest you appear opinionated, not too little, lest you seem dull. Small talk is a competitive sport. Every anecdote must be mildly amusing but not scandalous. If you mention a cousin's engagement, be sure it's to someone presentable. If you refer to last week's ball, be careful not to mention who stepped on whose hem. Should silence threaten, you can always fall back on the fail-safe. Isn't the soup delightful? A question nobody will ever answer honestly. And then there's the pacing. Dinner moves at the speed of social anxiety. Never fast enough for your rumbling stomach. Never slow enough to allow discreet escapes to the garden. Every time you think you've reached the end, a servant appears with another course. Game birds, cold beef, a pudding steamed into oblivion, and finally, the cheese board. You reach for the cheese with the air of a weary marathoner crossing the finish line, only to realize there's still dessert, coffee, and a little something to finish. All the while, you're performing, keeping your posture straight, your hands clean, and your face composed. If you dislike something, you must smile and take at least one polite bite, then carefully rearrange your food to make it look like you've made progress. Heaven forbid you reject a dish outright. That's an insult that could echo through family legend for generations. At last, the meal winds down. Coffee is served, conversation grows quieter, and guests begin to drift toward the drawing room, grateful to have survived another round of culinary endurance. Your stomach is full, your brain is numb, and you're already dreading tomorrow's leftovers. Dinner, not just a meal, but a masterclass in survival, strategy, and the fine art of pretending you have opinions about aspic. Well done. You're now qualified for a lifetime of small talk, and perhaps a midnight snack. You can't just go to bed. Now comes a selection of parlour games, dramatic readings, and charades, so forced you'd rather be cleaning the privy. You'll laugh politely at the same joke every night, because the alternative is being labelled difficult. Victorian evenings are a marathon of enforced merriment, all in the name of improving society. The dinner bell has barely stopped ringing before you're herded into the drawing room, where the furniture is discreetly rearranged and everyone's polite mask is set to maximum patience. There is no retreat to your bedroom with a book, at least not until you've suffered through 2 hours of wholesome, vaguely competitive, and frequently baffling entertainment. The host or hostess, always alarmingly chipper, announces the activities as if revealing the secrets of the universe. Charades, of course, is a perennial favourite. For the uninitiated, Victorian charades is less about wild gestures and more about performing miniature scenes from well-known novels, poems, or plays. If you've never tried to mime Lady of Shalott while Aunt Bertha shouts, "Pickles! It's pickles! Congratulations! You have not suffered enough." Next come the parlour games, each designed to foster lively spirits, while also creating a minefield of potential embarrassment. The minister's cat is a classic. Each person must describe the cat with a new adjective, going around the circle alphabetically. The minister's cat is an affable cat, a bothersome cat, a cantankerous cat, until someone forgets their place or invents a word like dyspeptic, at which point polite tittering and mild shame ensue. If charades and word games fail to ignite enthusiasm, there's always a dramatic reading. This is an opportunity for the family's would-be thespian, usually a cousin with strong feelings about iambic pentameter, to unleash their inner Shakespeare. You sit through 5 stanzas of the rhyme of the ancient mariner delivered with such drama you begin to worry the parlour rug might actually burst into flames. There is, inevitably, a lull, during which Uncle Horace requests something lighter, perhaps only to receive a passionate reading from Macbeth. The performance is met with thunderous applause and several confused relatives who thought it was supposed to be a comedy. Music may follow. The pianoforte is opened, sheet music fluttered, and you pray you won't be pressed into service again. The youngest sibling performs a piece they learned yesterday. The eldest cousin sings a ballad that lasts longer than dinner, and everyone nods along in what passes for harmony. The most you can hope for is that the dog doesn't join in, though he often does, and with more enthusiasm than anyone else in the room. Some nights, someone suggests blind man's bluff or snapdragon, games with the potential for actual injury, flaming raisins, or at least some honest excitement. But more often than not, the evening winds down with 20 questions, which inevitably devolves into a debate about whether an emu is truly a household object, or forfeits, which is mostly an excuse to make people sing, dance, or recite embarrassing poetry on command. Through it all, you smile and laugh at the right moments, lest you be accused of lacking sociability. You clap for performances, feign surprise at the twist endings, and enthusiastically guess the answers, even when you're secretly counting the minutes until escape. No one dares suggest simply relaxing in silence, lest they be mistaken for a malcontent, or, worse, sent to play the minister's cat with Aunt Bertha again. Eventually, the clock strikes a merciful hour. The games conclude, the room is set to rights, and you're finally allowed to drift off to bed, cheeks aching from polite laughter and soul just slightly worn. But you've done your duty, endured the forced fun, kept the peace, and maintained the delicate Victorian fiction that charades, parlour games, and dramatic readings are the very height of human joy. Congratulations. You've survived another evening of mandatory merriment. Sleep well. Tomorrow, you may be asked to perform the Lady of Shalott again, and you'll want to be ready. At last, you steal a few moments alone to write in your journal, reflect on your blessings, and privately despair that your entire day has been graded by the neighbours. The house is finally quiet, no more parlour games, no more forced applause, and, for a precious half hour, no one hovering nearby, ready to critique your posture or ask if you've written your thank you notes. You settle by candlelight at your little writing desk, a battered but beloved notebook before you, and an ink pot that somehow manages to leave a smudge on your nose every time you use it. Journaling is a sacred act, a tiny rebellion in a day otherwise spent performing for others. This is the only place you can truly be yourself, even if your most honest entries read like a catalogue of small grievances and near misses with disaster. Tuesday. Avoided Aunt Bertha's matchmaking by pretending to faint. Nearly worth the concussion. The soup was, again, aspic. You pour out the details that no one else would understand. The agony of a corset that's 2 inches too tight, the triumph of remembering all the forks at dinner, and the sheer adrenaline rush of sneaking jam from the larder undetected. The official tone of your journal is grateful and composed, but the subtext is pure, undiluted exhaustion. You list your blessings, good health, apart from the blisters and persistent sense of existential doom, a respectable family, even if they all insist on reciting poetry after dinner, and a roof over your head, preferably one without squirrels. For posterity's sake, you throw in a few lines about the joys of needlework and the profound satisfaction of a well-tended fern. But beneath the surface, you use your journal as an emotional pressure valve. Here you can admit that the endless social calls, perfectly ironed handkerchiefs, and marathon rounds of charades are not, in fact, your idea of happiness. You jot down the secret anxieties. Will mother ever approve of my hairpins? Did anyone else notice I nearly dropped my napkin at dinner? What if I die and they publish this? For every Dear Diary, today was delightful, there's a shadow entry. Dear Diary, today was survivable. Journaling also offers a private space to dream. You sketch out secret ambitions, travel to the continent, publish a novel under a daring pseudonym, or, on rebellious nights, buy your own hat without committee approval. The act of writing, slow and deliberate, helps you remember that you are a person with a mind, even if you spent most of the afternoon pretending to care about Aunt Augusta's embroidery sampler. Sometimes you try to be philosophical. Is there more to life than managing household accounts and remembering everyone's birthday? Is it possible to be both perfectly behaved and completely content, or must one choose? You sigh, realizing that Victorian society is built on the art of compromise between expectation and reality, reputation and self. As the candle burns lower, your eyelids grow heavy, and your handwriting devolves from careful script to exhausted scrawl. You sign off your entry with a vague hope that tomorrow will be less exhausting and more meaningful, or at the very least will include less aspic. You close the journal, tuck it away in your locked drawer, and take a moment to savor the privacy, a commodity rarer than diamonds in a world where even your thoughts are expected to be presentable. With the last of your energy, you slip into bed and let your mind wander, comforted by the knowledge that, at least for a few minutes each night, you exist for yourself alone. Sleep comes as a gentle relief, and tomorrow you'll wake up and do it all again, with a little more wit, a little more grit, and just a touch more existential dread. Congratulations. You have survived another Victorian day, journaled your secret truth, and kept your spirit quietly alive. Before bed, you must unpin your hair, recite prayers, and possibly negotiate with God for just one dream about not wearing a corset. Bedtime is an ordeal, and sleep is more of a social experiment than a guarantee. Night in the Victorian household arrives quietly, but not without its challenges. The candlelight flickers against the wallpaper, the house creaks as it settles, and you realize that your day isn't quite over. There is a rigid routine to wind down, a gauntlet of rituals designed to ensure both physical and moral cleanliness, plus a decent chance of making it through the night without becoming tomorrow's gossip. First comes hair. Victorian hair is an engineering project in itself, requiring roughly 30 minutes to dismantle each night. You begin by removing a miniature arsenal of pins, somewhere between 15 and 50, depending on the intricacy of the day's simple style. If you're lucky, you won't drop any into the chamber pot. You brush your hair in long, deliberate strokes, 100, if you're aiming for sainthood or at least impressing your mother, and try not to think about how many family secrets are trapped in the tangles. After hair comes face washing, which is always a bracing experience. The water is cold, the soap is suspiciously lumpy, and the towel could double as a piece of sandpaper. You clean away the day's powder and worries, watching your reflection in the dim mirror as you attempt to scrub off any lingering anxiety about tomorrow's breakfast conversation. Once your face is more or less returned to its original state, you examine your skin for new blemishes, as if each one is a personal failing or an omen of future spinsterhood. Now it's time for the spiritual portion of the evening. Prayer. You kneel by your bed, hands folded, and recite the same set of memorized verses you've been muttering since childhood. But tonight, maybe you slip in a few requests of your own, something about a little more patience with Aunt Bertha, a miracle cure for jam stains, and perhaps, just once, a dream in which you wear trousers and do something truly scandalous, like ride a bicycle or refuse a second helping of aspic. Bedtime itself is an event. The bed is a fortress of blankets and pillows, constructed to guard against the notorious English chill. You slip between cold sheets, careful not to let your toes touch any patches missed by the hot water bottle. If you're particularly fortunate, the fire in your bedroom is still smouldering. If not, you try to convince yourself that shivering builds character. But sleep does not come easily to the Victorian mind. Instead, you lie awake cataloguing the day's embarrassments and tomorrow's anxieties. Did you say goodbye or good evening to Lady Prescott at tea? Did you remember to wind the clock, close the window, and hide your journal from snooping siblings? Your brain sprints through social calculations, each one more catastrophic than the last, until you finally surrender and listen to the soothing sound of the wind rattling the panes. In those last drowsy moments, you confront the existential dread that comes from being a Victorian woman, the sense that your life is always on display, that your worth is measured in manners, and that even in the dark, someone might be judging the way you snore. You attempt to find peace in the knowledge that, at least for now, you have survived the day, mostly intact and only a little traumatized by aspic. Eventually, your thoughts slow, your body relaxes, and you drift off, hoping for a night free of dreams about corsets, scandal, or accidentally addressing the vicar as mum. Congratulations, you've made it through the nightly rituals. Tomorrow, you'll wake up and start again, armed with a hairbrush, a prayer, and the faint hope of a slightly less existential bedtime. Sleep well. In Victorian England, that's as much as anyone can ask. If you catch a cold, you're immediately confined to bed, surrounded by worried relatives and a rotating cast of dubious medical experts. You'll be treated with everything from mustard plasters to outright denial. The first sign of illness, a sneeze, a cough, a complaint of chilliness, sends the household into high alert. The news spreads faster than the actual germs. Within minutes, your mother, the housekeeper, and at least 3 aunts have gathered by your bedside, clutching handkerchiefs and reciting the family's favourite medical advice. You must rest, they insist, while simultaneously asking you to recall, in detail, what you last ate, how much air you took in on yesterday's walk, and whether or not your feet were exposed to damp. Victorian sick days are equal parts drama and inconvenience. The sick room is prepared with the urgency of a royal birth. Curtains are drawn, a faint smell of camphor fills the air, and someone arrives with a tray holding weak tea and dry toast. The fire is kept burning at an oddly punishing temperature, as if sweating is a universal cure. You are tucked into bed with enough blankets to smother all symptoms and any hope of breathing freely. A bell is placed within reach, not for summoning comfort, but for summoning more people to interrogate you about your symptoms. Enter the home remedies. Your relatives rotate through a series of treatments guaranteed to draw out the humours. Someone produces a bottle of patent medicine with a label that promises relief from colds, coughs, rickets, and perhaps even original sin. It tastes like liquid shoe polish and burns all the way down. If that fails, there's the ever-popular mustard plaster, applied with the gentle touch of a bricklayer. It burns, it itches, and it leaves you wondering if the cure is, in fact, the punishment for complaining. Medical professionals, if called, arrive with their own set of horrors. The family doctor is equal parts sage and gambler, ready to prescribe everything from leeches, just to be sure, to a purgative, cleanses the system. The less fortunate may encounter a neighbour with a homeopathic streak, ready to recommend everything from lavender compresses to a fresh onion worn around the neck. You comply. Mostly because resistance requires more energy than you have, and you're already half convinced you're dying of boredom. Meanwhile, the family debates over your bedside, all in carefully modulated whispers. Is it a slight indisposition or something lingering? Should you be allowed to read? Or will the excitement of a novel send you into a fever? Every cup of tea is administered with the solemnity of a potion. Every cough is greeted with concern, advice, or, in the case of Aunt Bertha, a long tale about the time she nearly perished from a cold but was saved by brisk walks and an alarming quantity of bacon fat. Rest is the official prescription, but actual sleep is impossible. The door creaks open every 10 minutes, servants checking the fire, siblings sneaking a peek, relatives just making sure you're still with us. The only peace comes in the small hours of the morning, when you can lie back, surrounded by your mountain of blankets, and imagine a world in which a touch of catarrh is met with nothing but a quiet nap and a stack of scandalous novels. Recovery is just as theatrical. You're praised for your bravery. Such a good patient. Hardly complained at all, and gently ushered back into the household routine, though forbidden from vigorous activity for at least a fortnight, unless, of course, you're needed for a particularly dull social call. Congratulations. You have survived the Victorian sick day, dosed, roasted, interrogated, and ultimately released back into the wild. And if you still have a cough, best keep it to yourself. You don't want to go through all that again until at least Christmas. Beneath the layers of etiquette and ruffles, every Victorian woman harbours secret joys and vices. Whether it's sneaking sweets, reading banned books, or simply daydreaming about a world where you can wear pants. Outwardly, your life is an endless parade of good behaviour, gentle accomplishments, and polite restraint. But behind every properly arranged fringe curtain, there exists a whole clandestine universe. The truth is, even the most respectable young lady has her guilty pleasures, and, more often than not, she's gotten very good at hiding them. Let's start with the classics, sweets. Officially, you partake of sugar only during sanctioned mealtimes, and always with the restraint expected of someone whose waist is under public scrutiny. But oh, the thrill of slipping an extra bonbon from the parlour tray when nobody's watching, or sneaking a handful of candied violets from the jar Aunt Prudence thinks is strictly ornamental. Some evenings, you and your most trusted friend might even raid the larder for a spoonful of jam, scandalous, sticky, and absolutely worth the risk. If anyone asks about the missing sugar, you simply blame the children, the dog, or the elusive draft. Books are another gateway to the forbidden. You keep a respectable volume on your nightstand, perhaps The Young Lady's Guide to Moral Uplift, or Sensible Proverbs for Every Occasion. But buried beneath it, safely tucked away from prying eyes, is a dog-eared copy of the latest sensation novel. Sensational stories of murder, intrigue, and heroines who dare to have feelings. Maybe you swap books with your more daring friends, each of you becoming experts in hiding your reading material within plain brown covers, should anyone approach. If you're especially brave, you might even possess a contraband French novel, smuggled from a cousin's trunk and read by candlelight, heart pounding with every turn of the page. And then there's the sartorial daydream, pants. The simple, glorious freedom of not having to manage 7 pounds of petticoats every time you want to sit down or leave a room. It's not just about comfort. It's about the fantasy of walking briskly through the garden, climbing a tree, or, heaven forbid, actually running for the sheer pleasure of it. In your quietest moments, you imagine a parallel universe where ladies can wear trousers, own pockets, and not be judged for the contents. But not all secrets are so innocent. Some women keep a stash of nerve drops or a bottle of sherry for those particularly trying afternoons spent enduring family drama or Aunt Bertha's piano recitals. You might have a hidden stash of spicy letters, old valentines, anonymous poetry, or a note from a would-be suitor that you keep more for the excitement than the sentiment. For the artistically inclined, there are forbidden sketches, caricatures of your relatives, fanciful designs for hats you'd never dare to wear, or even a scandalously lifelike drawing of the gardener, purely for practice, of course. Then, there are the dreams that never make it past your journal. Secret ambitions. Travel, publishing, performing on stage, or becoming an explorer in a world that only pretends to allow such things for women. Sometimes you sketch your future self, astride a horse, behind a lectern, or simply alone in a room where nobody asks what you're doing. The fact that these are secrets says more about society than about you. Still, the best-kept secret is simply the pleasure of solitude. 10 stolen minutes in the garden, a few pages read in the pantry, a private giggle at a ridiculous hat, or a whispered joke with a friend who knows just how silly all this propriety really is. And so, while the world outside sees a model of decorum, inside you keep a rich private world alive. A world of tiny rebellions, secret pleasures, and dreams that make the corsets, the small talk, and even the aspic worth enduring. Because what nobody admits is, being a Victorian woman is a masterclass in survival, and the real fun always happens after everyone else has left the room. Every respectable Victorian woman needs fresh air, which is why you're now embarking on a morning walk that's equal parts exercise and competitive social theatre. With a chaperone 2 steps behind and a parasol angled just so, you sashay down the street at the precise speed that says, "I'm above scandal, but not above judging your hat." Walking is less about health and more about being seen, ideally by the right people, and absolutely never by anyone selling fish. The preparations for a proper walk rival those of a minor military operation. First, you select a dress that is sufficiently fashionable but not so eye-catching that it risks whispers among the neighbours. Gloves are essential, preferably spotless, as nothing says fallen woman quite like grass stains on your fingertips. Your shoes must be practical for cobblestones, yet delicate enough to suggest you've never run for a carriage in your life. And don't forget your bonnet. arranged at the exact angle to frame your face in a way that suggests both modesty and just the faintest whiff of mystery. Your chaperone, whether mother, aunt, or slightly judgmental family friend, inspects your outfit with a gaze sharp enough to cut thread. She adjusts your collar, tuts at a rebellious curl, and arms herself with a reticule large enough to carry smelling salts, a tiny Bible, and enough peppermints to fuel both of you until lunch. Together, you exit the house, a team, but not a democracy. The street itself is a bustling stage. You are not simply out for a walk. You are participating in the grand pageant of local society. Every housewife at her window, every errant child, every shopkeeper dusting his awning is both audience and judge. You nod politely to acquaintances, exchange carefully calibrated smiles with potential rivals, and offer a tiny wave to any friend not currently under suspicion of impropriety. There are rules to this promenade. Never walk so fast that you appear rushed. What are you fleeing exactly? But never dawdle, lest someone think you're loitering for attention or, heaven forbid, for a glimpse of that new clerk at the haberdasher's. Sidewalk navigation is its own sport, a subtle dance of yielding, advancing, and gracefully avoiding any hint of actual exertion. The only thing more dangerous than tripping over a loose paving stone is making eye contact with the local fishmonger, who may shout greetings that include details about your family's haddock consumption, social death. The parasol, meanwhile, is more than a sunshield. It's your best prop. You twirl it with languid grace, using it to signal disapproval, a quick snapshot, interest, a subtle tilt toward a particularly well-dressed passerby, or outright distress when a stray dog comes too close, or worse, an unchaperoned bachelor. The art of the parasol is to say everything without uttering a word. If you're lucky, your route will take you through the park, where you can admire the flower beds, make brief, suitably uninteresting conversation with other walkers, and be seen by exactly the right number of eligible gentlemen. No more, no less. You stop to observe the ducks, which are less judgmental than your neighbours, and exchange harmless gossip with your chaperone, who always manages to make a question about someone's geraniums sound like a warning about moral decay. Inevitably, there are obstacles. A sudden rain shower threatens to frizz your hair and undermine your composure. A runaway child nearly collides with your skirts, prompting a gasp and a lecture on decorum. You skillfully avoid stepping in anything that would sully your boots or your reputation. The walk concludes with a triumphant return home, cheeks slightly flushed, dignity intact, and just enough of a breeze in your bonnet to suggest that, yes, you have embraced the great outdoors. Your chaperone declares the outing a success. No fainting, no scandal, and not a single fishmonger in sight. Congratulations. You have paraded down the street for no reason at all, performed the subtle ballet of Victorian respectability, and returned victorious. Until tomorrow, when the game begins again and your parasol waits, ready for its encore. If you're lucky enough to have a garden, congratulations. You've unlocked the era's most respectable excuse to dig around in the mud and pretend you're too busy to answer intrusive questions about marriage prospects. Victorian gardening is less about growing vegetables and more about competing for the title of most unnecessary rosebush. You kneel in the dirt, deadheading flowers, and nurturing a deep, silent rivalry with Mrs. O. Pennyfeather next door, whose chrysanthemums are frankly show-offs. In the eyes of society, gardening is the one truly virtuous pastime. Unlike music, which risks becoming too emotional, or reading, which can lead to dangerous ideas, tending to your flower beds is an unimpeachable sign of good character. It's also a rare chance for a bit of honest physical activity, though, of course, you must never admit to enjoying it. There's a careful choreography to the whole business. Kneel on a mat to avoid soiling your dress, don gloves to protect your delicate hands, and wield your trowel with the practiced air of someone who's definitely read about gardening in the ladies' magazine. The garden itself is a canvas for your ambitions, frustrations, and social ambitions. Every border, every climbing rose, Every suspiciously rare tulip is both a personal triumph and a not-so-subtle message to visitors. Yes, I have taste. No, I did not murder my husband and bury him under the wisteria, no matter what Mrs. Pennyfeather says. The planting decisions are endlessly debated. Bluebells for humility, violets for modesty, a single dramatic lily for that touch of I could be mysterious if I wanted to. Of course, the real reason to garden is tactical. There's no better excuse for missing an awkward afternoon tea or evading a persistent suitor than the sweet peas simply cannot wait another minute. You can always disappear behind the laurel hedge when Aunt Bertha is spotted approaching, secateurs in hand and your most pensive expression at the ready. Few dare to interrupt a woman who is obviously on a mission to defeat blight and overbearing relatives in a single afternoon. But make no mistake, gardening is also war. Your most formidable opponent is always next door. Miss Pennyfeather has spent years perfecting her borders, cultivating rumours about your dahlias, and boasting falsely about her award-winning compost. You pretend not to notice when she leans over the fence to comment on your weeding technique or offers unsolicited advice on the ideal depth for planting gladiolus bulbs. Sometimes she appears to be pruning her roses, but you know she's actually counting your blooms. And, if you're honest, you've done the same, perhaps with a slightly superior air. Despite the rivalry, gardening is a rare pocket of peace in your schedule. The scent of freshly turned earth, the gentle hum of bees, and the occasional thrill of discovering a perfect, unsupervised worm offer a simple pleasure that almost makes up for the endless rounds of needlework and forced conversation. Here, among the marigolds and pansies, you can indulge in daydreams, listen to the world go quietly mad around you, and get dirt under your nails with no witnesses but the robins. Your mother may approve, provided you avoid sunburn and unladylike levels of exertion. Your siblings leave you alone, convinced you're on some kind of penance. The garden is your sanctuary, your arena, your silent therapy session, a place where you can cultivate something beautiful, or at least keep your hands busy while plotting next week's witty retort for Mrs. Pennyfeather. As the afternoon wanes, you stand back to survey your handiwork. The flower beds are triumphant, the lawn respectably even, and your rival's chrysanthemums, though still insufferable, look just a touch less smug. You dust off your gloves, straighten your bonnet, and walk inside, feeling oddly victorious. Gardening, proof that sometimes the best way to survive Victorian womanhood is to dig deep, plant bravely, and let the neighbours stew in their envy. Today's calendar says dress fitting, which is Victorian code for voluntary immobility while strangers poke you with pins. You stand on a tiny platform, arms outstretched, while a seamstress mutters quietly about your posture, and a distant cousin offers unsolicited advice about sleeve length. The fitting lasts long enough for you to reflect on every biscuit you've ever eaten and to question whether you even like the colour puce. Victorian dress fittings are an elaborate rite of passage, a blend of silent endurance, awkward self-reflection, and the constant threat of being jabbed by someone with more opinions than patience. The day begins with an air of hushed importance. You're escorted into the fitting room, a place where time stands still and the only certainty is that someone will measure your waist and then suggest it might benefit from just a little more discipline. First, there's the ritual of undressing. Layers are peeled away like the petals of a very nervous onion. Outer gown, underskirt, petticoat, corset cover, and the corset itself, which, for the record, never seems to fit exactly the same way twice. Every garment is carefully folded and laid aside, while you try not to think about the draft and hope no one comments on your chemise. The seamstress greets you with a pincushion strapped to her wrist and a look that says, "We're about to find out how much you really like cake." Then, the fabric is draped and pinned with the precision of a military operation. The bodice is adjusted, the skirts are arranged, and yards of fabric swirl around you like a very decorative straitjacket. Your job is to stand perfectly still, breathe shallowly, and resist the urge to scratch your nose, an itch that will only grow more urgent as the minutes tick by. Meanwhile, the peanut gallery assembles. Your mother sits nearby, offering gentle encouragement and less gentle reminders that we want this dress to be timeless, not attention-seeking. A cousin or two drift in, helpfully offering thoughts like, "Have you considered a fuller sleeve?" Or, "That colour's unusual." The seamstress grunts, tugs, and pins, her murmured observations ranging from, "The bust is generous," translation, "You are doomed to more boning too. We'll just let out the waist a half-inch," translation, "Someone's been enjoying scones." Every inch of you is measured, poked, and prodded. You have never been more aware of your own body. Is your posture correct? Are your arms the same length? Did you actually gain weight? Or is puce just an unforgiving colour? You stare straight ahead, watching the dust motes in the sunlight and trying to mentally compose your next diary entry. Survived another fitting. Lost feeling in left foot. May never look at velvet the same way again. The process is agonizingly slow. Every seam must be perfect, every hem even, every detail discussed, altered, and then discussed again. If you dare to sigh or shuffle your feet, the seamstress sighs louder and declares, "If you can't stand still now, how do you expect to stand through a 3-hour dinner?" You suppress the urge to reply, with hope and sturdy shoes. The grand finale comes when you're finally allowed to see yourself in the full-length mirror. There you are, the dress taking shape, pins glinting in the afternoon light, a vision of Victorian elegance, at least until someone points out that the trim needs adjusting or the bustle could be more assertive. You nod, as if you understand the politics of bustles, and try to ignore the existential question burning in your mind. Is all this really worth it for a single garden party? When at last you're released, you peel off the test garments, thank the seamstress, who is already plotting your next fitting, and escape with a sense of accomplishment mixed with mild trauma. You're one step closer to owning a dress that will make you the envy of the neighbourhood. Or at least, the only one in puce. Congratulations. You've survived the dress fitting, a lesson in patience, posture, and the peculiar human capacity to suffer for fashion. Your house is technically staffed, but every day brings new opportunities to master the fine Victorian art of the polite complaint. The coal scuttle is half empty, the footman's hair is slightly too modern, and someone has moved your favourite armchair 3 inches to the left, possibly as part of a household coup. You summon your inner general, issue veiled instructions, and brace for the next skirmish in the ongoing domestic Cold War. Victorian households run on a steady diet of discipline, protocol, and subtle psychological warfare. As mistress, you're expected to keep everyone in line, maintain impeccable standards, and do it all with the sort of gentle firmness that suggests both authority and deep reserves of patience, even if you have neither. The official rule, never shout. The unofficial rule, never let them see you panic. The daily parade of minor offences begins with the morning inspection. You glide through the house with the measured step of a monarch on a surprise visit, noting with eagle-eyed precision every spot of dust, misaligned cushion, and slightly wilted fern. The maid who dusts your writing desk is unfailingly cheerful, which makes it doubly hard to mention that the silver inkstand now smells faintly of onions. You smile, and with a voice so calm, it borders on threatening. You say, "Perhaps next time. Just a touch less enthusiasm with the polish, Mary. It's a delicate dance." You must never complain directly, but instead deploy a battery of euphemisms and half-compliments. "The soup was interesting tonight, cook. Perhaps tomorrow something a little less adventurous." Or, to the footman, "What a striking hairstyle, John. Is it Parisian?" The most powerful phrase in your arsenal is, "I wonder if we might try it this way," which translates roughly to, "Do this immediately, or I shall die of embarrassment before luncheon." And there are always mysterious incidents. The coal scuttle, for instance, is never quite full. Is it the new scullery maid, or has the butler declared a private war on heat? You're never quite sure, but you leave subtle hints. How brisk the drawing room feels this morning. Perhaps we could be extra generous with the coal. The armchair, inexplicably relocated, becomes the subject of a week-long investigation as you carefully mention to everyone, within earshot of the guilty party, how the light in this corner is so perfect for reading. Sometimes, of course, your efforts backfire. The staff, operating under their own parallel chain of command, develop a silent code for household warfare. The salt is never in the same place twice. The housekeeper insists the armchair must be moved for better air circulation. The gardener mysteriously forgets to trim Mrs. Pennyfeather's side of the hedge. You issue instructions, receive bland assurances, and wait for the next, inevitably creative, rebellion. Your only defense is to master the art of the subtle escalation. Begin with a gentle reminder. Follow up with a slightly more pointed suggestion. If all else fails, you bring out the ultimate weapon, a visit from your mother or the vicar, both guaranteed to inspire a sudden, miraculous improvement in standards for at least 48 hours. Yet, through all this, you're also expected to be kind, attentive, and never, never forget a birthday or special occasion. You remember favorite teas, inquire after sick relatives, and distribute modest gifts at Christmas, even as you quietly plot a full reshuffle of the kitchen staff. The goal is harmony, but the reality is endless negotiation, a cold war conducted with silver trays and folded napkins. At the end of the day, you collapse into your perfectly replaced armchair, reflecting on your victories. The fire is blazing, the soup is edible, and the footman's hair is, well, still a little too Parisian. But you'll tackle that tomorrow. Congratulations. You've survived another round of the servant problem, demonstrating all the tactical genius of a field marshal and the patience of a saint. In Victorian England, this is simply what's expected. So, here we are at the end of a day in the life of a Victorian woman. If you made it through the corsets, the calling cards, the garden rivalries, and the daily gauntlet of social rules, congratulations, you've survived what was basically history's longest job interview, with fewer snacks and a lot more embroidery. It's easy to laugh at the etiquette, the endless small talk, and the absurdity of fainting couches. But the reality is these women were Olympic-level survivors in a world where even sitting down could be a test of moral character. They navigated judgment with grace, spun boredom into art, and managed to look unbothered while single-handedly keeping the stationery industry afloat. They were CEOs in crinolines, diplomats in bonnets, and experts at pretending they weren't about to pass out from the fourth layer of petticoats. So tonight, as you nestle into your soft, supportive, probably non-horsehair-filled bed, maybe whisper a thank you to the generations before you who survived rigid routines, impossible expectations, and the kind of discomfort that would make a modern chiropractor weep. Be grateful for elastic waistbands, indoor plumbing, and the freedom to leave your house without a hat, or at all. Because history may be awkward, inconvenient, and just a little bit ridiculous, but it's also proof that people are endlessly adaptable, quietly resilient, and occasionally extremely funny. Let that thought settle in as you drift off. You don't have to write a thank you letter to your neighbour for the privilege of borrowing sugar, and nobody's judging your nightgown. Sleep well, knowing you've earned it, without a single fainting couch in sight. Good night.